How you doing? All right, today I want to have a little story time about an old football coach named Chuck Fairbanks. And why in the world are we talking about an old football coach today? Well, I think some of the stories that come out of the NFL in the 70s and 80s are particularly unique and different from today's sports culture. I mean, one of the things Chuck Fairbanks had to navigate through in his career, he got hired in, I believe it was 73 with the Patriots. Um, and during his career, things would happen like there was a player strike because the owners would renege on contracts that Fairbanks is, negotiating with his star players, trying to keep them around, trying to keep them fairly compensated. And the owners would just straight up be like, no, hey, we're not doing that. And so he alienated the coaches and the players so much so that there was a player strike during Fairbanks' career. But I think just some stories that I will tell, just really insightful from this era and interesting to learn about. I'm currently a 25-year-old, and so the lack of media coverage also combined with the youth of some of these organizations and the inexperience from the owners and high-ranking front office people just creates a really dynamic and unique culture. And so Chuck Fairbanks' main story I have to tell today is he was angry at Chuck Sullivan and his son were the owners of the Patriots at this time. And because of things like reneging on contract negotiations and kind of making the coach be the front man for some of their really tough and ungenerous decision making, kind of stirred Coach Fairbanks the wrong way. And so I believe in the 78 season, let me double check. Yeah, it was 78 season. Patriots are doing really well. Chuck Fairbanks had helped turn the program around from a perennial loser, and they were 11-4, won the AFC East, were going to the playoffs. It had their home game against Earl Campbell and the Houston Oilers. And right before that game, Chuck Fairbanks gets suspended from the team because he was in basically he had committed to being the next coach of Colorado University, and there was evidence that he was already spending work time at the Patriots facility recruiting Colorado players. And so they basically suspended him for breach of contract. They would figure things out before the first playoff game, which surprisingly they lost. When your coach is suspended from the team and you're sending that type of message to your locker room, the odds of you winning a high-stakes playoff game are pretty slim. And, just imagine that type of media story. A coach gets suspended for basically committing to another job in secret by his own team. And this would continue in a lawsuit after the season with the Patriots suing Chuck Fairbanks for breach of contract. So now not only this Patriots organization and ownership had led to a player strike, they had led to steering their coach away to the fact that he was willingly taking a step down to a high-ranking, or not even, a pretty bad, mediocre Colorado program after having one of the best seasons in Patriots history. That's how much this ownership group had stirred this guy away. And then they're suing him after the season. And the Patriots pretty much won the lawsuit, which means, they were willing to sue Chuck Fairbanks into staying a part of their team, even though he didn't want to be there. And the contract ended up getting bought out by, the Colorado, some fundraiser booster club, which I imagine the Patriots ownership probably knew was going to happen if they won that lawsuit. And I just think, could you imagine that story happening today? Ownership screws over coach time and time again. Coach, gets revenge by negotiating with another team, willingly taking a step down, gets suspended from the team right before a playoff game. They lose the playoff game in pretty bad fashion. It was like 34-14, and Earl Campbell ran all over them. And then the team continues to sue the coach after the season, and then his contract gets bought out. Chuck Fairbanks would coach again at Colorado and in the USFL with the New Jersey Generals, I believe. I know it's the Generals. And neither of them went particularly well. He didn't have good success at either place. But the one thing about Chuck Fairbanks is his legacy lives on, though, especially thanks to constant positive praise from one Coach Belichick, who credits Fairbanks with, being pretty innovative. He was one of the first people to use the 3-4 odd defense, where you have less down defensive linemen, but they're covering more gaps, and you just have a lot more angles and twists and stunts and different directions you can take your personnel in. And that's, obviously a 3-4 defense is like a staple of most teams nowadays, college and pro. A lot of his protection scheme, it's, even if you are playing high school football, you probably learn about 60, 70, 80 protection schemes, and that's stuff that Chuck Fairbanks had come up with during his time. And some of his organization for the draft and his departments he hired to prepare for the draft, and the way he structured training camp and practice. These are all things that, guys like Michael Lombardi and Coach Belichick and Matt Patricia and other, Robert Kraft, other Patriots, relevant coaches, owners, personnel have spoken positively about since Chuck Fairbanks' death, rest in peace. And so I thought this was a really interesting story, something that probably, it's very relevant to today's football because coaches are always jumping ship and moving up and moving down, but this amount of drama within an organization would be front page news and would probably be the biggest story in sports, at least for a couple weeks, if not a couple months, if it happened in our day and age. So, interesting story I brought to you today. If you liked the video, subscribe, like, appreciate it. Even if you don't do that, have a great day regardless.